Hello there, Pursuing Freedom friends. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Erin Bradley, and we have a great show in store for you today with my good friend, Katie Kim, who is basically a real estate rock star. This woman has done it all. She's got decades growing up in the real estate industry, selling real estate, building a team, becoming a developer, and that's really where her heart and soul lies. She is the founder of the Katie Kim Educational Program, which empowers aspiring developers to overcome fears, navigate complexities, and confidently tackle their first or their next real estate project. And what I love about Katie is that she's been really helping me to demystify the world of real estate development because as somebody who came up in the sales side of the business on the mortgage side, we've spent a lot of time over the years with this podcast interviewing real estate agents and top producers and team leaders and authors and speakers and coaches on all things mindset, strategy, scaling, et cetera. But we've never really gone down this path of the development side. And Katie's not only a pro, but she also has this way of just inspiring others to believe in the ability to set their mind to something and create the extraordinary. And I feel like her magic is transferable to everything that we're doing here and that we're passionate about here at Pursuing Freedom. So I'm thrilled that she's taking the time out of her busy schedule to be with us today. So, first of all, thank you, Katie, for being here. I really appreciate having you.
Likewise, thank you. I'm so excited. And that was quite an intro. That's awesome. Thank you very much.
One of my superpowers, I just talk with the intro and then we go from there. Just kidding.
What a many.
Uh, so, Katie, give us a little backstory. Like how did you get into this? How did you get to where you are now, and how you're now so passionate about helping others do the same? Bring us along the journey with you to what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, so try and keep a Reader's Digest version. But I was born and bred into a real estate development construction family. So kind of grew up like going to volleyball practice and then building walls, or soccer practice and pouring concrete. And, where people say like family bonding time was, like fix and flip for me. And I grew up with it. So I grew up learning the field side. And then when I got older, I would do the office and drafting. And so I really got every piece of the puzzle. And like a lot of kids that grew up in family business went away to college and said, I'm never doing that. Like, I'm never buying the family business. Right. And I was a nerd brain in the sense of numbers and figuring out complex things. And so I went into computer science and actually got my master's degree. I went to work for a consulting company. And the fast I can say what I did is I worked with technology 3 to 5 years to market, found strategic, profitable solutions, and implemented them. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But what I found is there wasn't a passion. I mean, I love the people I worked with. That was a passion for me. But I wanted that, like every aspiring young professional, I want to be partner. Like, how do I get to partner path? And like I was so narrowly focused on that I really hit a big burnout point and was like, what am I doing? Right. Like sometimes we're so smart and focused, and then we get to a point where like, how did I get here? And so I pivot and I went to work for an entrepreneurial company, a startup in tech, and then it got bought out by Oracle. So I was like, do I go back to that? And then my family was like, do you want to take over the company? And I was like, no, but I want to learn that development side because I feel like that's where the real wealth generation was created in my family. And, side note, side venture, right? As we all have little side adventures in life, is I started investing in real estate as soon as I got to Chicago. And then I got my license to handle my real estate happenings because I'm like, well, if I'm finding the properties, I'm vetting them. I want, whatever the percentage is, we won't say that so we don't get in violation, but whatever that percentage side is as my equity. And so then I started it on the side. When I went back, took over the family construction company, we expanded to property management, listing other people's stuff. And then we started to put some really cool deliverables online. But I ran into that fulfillment issue again. Like, I wasn't creating this life that I was like, get up in the morning, so passionate, rock it out. And I realized there were people coming into our office that were saying, I need to build my business, but I only have enough money to do this or that. And I was like, that shouldn't be a choice. We should figure out how you do all of it together. Like, build your business, build your real estate, own it. Because there's so many times with the real estate development world that people will be like, yeah, I'll do that for you. And I'm going to take 50% of this and 70% of your business. And you're like, is it worth it? And I was like, no, I want you to keep your business yours. And I want you to keep your equity yours. I'll guide you through the process. So I launched the developer for fee service back in 2015, and we launched our first project, the bakery project. And from there, that was my passion. I loved teaching and helping and guiding people through the process and really making sure their project, their business stays theirs, because too many times people want a piece of it and they're not entitled to it. It's your business. You worked hard. Like, you keep it. Let's go. Let's grow, kind of thing. So, and now recently I've launched the online real estate development academy to take that to the next level. God kind of smacked me over the head with a frying pan last summer and was like, more, like, you need to do more impact, Katie. And so after I wrestled with him for a while, here we are.
So talk us through some, I guess, for lack of a better word, case studies of
Yeah.
individuals, and even going back as far as 2015, when you started to realize that your passion was in helping others be guided through the process, and you did that in a fee-based structure. Can you share with us what were some of your case studies like of the newbies, the people
Yeah.
that felt curious but clueless? Because I think that's who I am. I'm curious but clueless, and I
Mhm.
suspect there might be some other listeners out there feeling the same way.
Yeah, so the bakery project is the one everybody loves to hear because we had like 8 financial sources in it. And it was a project that they'd been renting. So the bakery started in 1861 and they'd been renting the whole entire time. So, like, think about that from a mortgage standpoint. Like, how many times have you bought that building, right? How many times, have you already paid for it? But the thing was, nobody was showing them the process. They were showing them the way, and they were too busy working in their business to really not necessarily work on their business, but work on their growth plan, their wealth plan. Like, what does this look like when I retire? Right. And so when actually the city came to us to say, hey, we want the bakery in our city. So we were kind of coming through a conduit to them, but they were like, "We wanna go in something that represents our brand." And I'm like, "Okay, you're 1861-year-old German bakery, let's figure this out, but, renovation is gonna be costing you more than new construction." And they're like, "Yeah, we know, that's the problem," right? Like, we want something that's our brand, but they're also on a shoestring budget because it's a locally owned mom and pop, bakery. And so it's like, how do we bridge this gap of where's the capital come from? How do we do this? How do we not put too much debt on the business? That's a big thing when you're starting to expand. And we all know, and you're a prime example and model of it. Like, you got to expand and put some money on the table before you're ready, right? And that's an uncomfortable pivot and shift and step. And so what we did is we went in, we assessed their business. Where do they want to go? Where do they want to grow? And we came up with a couple different paths. They decided the path forward. We knew of a building that was coming online and it matched up well. That's a whole separate side story of that because that's a fun one. But when we started to look at their business, we said, okay, if we give you a basement, we can save 34% off your cost of goods. Okay. We can start to hedge price increases, different things. But then we also looked at, like, what other things can you do with the current staff you have? What other revenue models can you do? Right. So they're like, well, we can do an event center. We've done that before. And then the only requirement is they have to use their cakes, which they were using them anyway. And then we put some other tenant spaces in there. We guided them through the whole setup of the capital stacks. What do we have to work with? Putting together the investor pitch deck because they'd never invested, they'd never pitched to an investor. And so we guided them through that whole process. They made all the decisions, but we kind of had that, like, you could do this, 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 this. This is, the pros and cons of all those processes and decisions. And then we managed and drove the project to what they wanted. And that was the North Star, and that was like, what do you guys want? What do your brand want? And the beauty of that is we ended the project with our investors being bought out after 4 years. They got 353% return. The bakery owners got into a $5.5 million deal with only $50,000 in, and they owned 82% off the bat. And 4 years after, they own 100%, and that's making a six-figure return for them now.
Wow.
And we taught them how to asset manage it and turn that over to them. Over time, we taught them how to property manage and turn that over to them. And we're still on a like an on-call consulting basis, but like that to me is my passion, my, like, yes, that's a success, right? investors got good return. The owners got in for the bakery got in for 3 times the space for 1.5 times the cost. They got into a 6 times building for, again, 1.5 times the original cost. We lowered their utilities. So it's about, what do you have to work with? And knowing that I can't put this debt load on the business, but I can use the business to leverage all these incentives that can come into the project, like for stuff they're already going to be paying for. So to kind of like give an example of that, right? So if you buy a building, simple, like if you buy house, fourplex, something like that, right? And you improve it, right? So you add a ADU, you add, you redo it, right? You're improving it. You're going to now probably have an increased property tax, right? So one of the economic incentives that we created for the bakery was a TIF district, a tax incremental financing district, where, in a nutshell, this is very high level, there's more details to it, but like when you increase that property tax from where you started or where the TIF is created, this is called your increment. You can negotiate getting that back from the village. So we said, we want 100% of what we're going to create back, and we want you to bond it or create a mortgage up front. So now as we pay our property taxes, that's really paying that debt on it. So it's those smart ways to use what the business is already paying to now come and help it build the business. And that to me is the real power of economic incentives, when you do them properly and set it up right in those developments. So like that's like an owner operator, right? And there's many more facets and details to that project, and they've expanded a couple times. And they were, that raise, how we structured it was really creative, because again, we couldn't give the investors an 18% or 20% IRR because it wasn't there. The cash flow wasn't there. So we did it with tax credits and depreciation. We did it a different way. So again, what do we have to work with? And then how do we bring that in to be a win-win-win and meet our clients' objectives, because their brand itself, people would want to invest, because they have that strong of a business.
When you did that with the bakery, was that an existing building or was that a new construction?
That was an existing building. It actually was all boarded up. It had about 5 fires in it. It had the highest lead-based paint content the state inspector, sorry, had ever seen. It
Wow.
was potentially beautiful, as my husband makes me say. Because I go in there, I'm like, this is gorgeous. And he's like, you're smoking crack, honey. Like, this is not. But when you're a developer, you see what could be, right? And so to me, it was in alignment with their mission to go into that old building. And the building actually was 1893, 95. So we kind of said good enough. Like we couldn't get 1861. But yeah, and going in and like renovating it and what could work here. And there's a lot of back and forth in that conversation.
Let's say someone's listening and they're like, okay, but I don't own a bakery, but I'm intrigued and maybe I want to own commercial real estate and I don't know where to get started. Give us some examples of people like that you've worked with. They might be a W-2 employee making a good living and they just want to figure out how to get into real estate investing in this capacity. And I think one of the words that trips me up is like the word development itself, because I think I want to buy commercial buildings. you know, is the development piece like how we see a potentially pretty place and we build in that equity through, the improvements and things like this? Like, I guess how broad is the word development with all of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's often gets confused. And I'll send you a slide to put with this episode, but it's the 7 stages of development, or 7 phases more likely. And at each phase, there's, you can value add, put some work into it and get a different higher value, right? So one of the phases is, building systems, building improvements, where you're making the building more efficient and or more cost effective. So it's taking, a big house and turning it into co-living, right? So that's development. Fix and flip, that's development. And so where people get like mindset, like they have been taught like, oh, there's this big development right in town and it's the shopping mall, or it's, the domain, or, some of those like big shopping centers or office parks or tech parks. But like it can be land development. It could be land assembly. It could be getting a couple different parcels together and saying, now this is a big enough parcel somebody can do something with. I can sell that. Now you're a land developer, and there's even like I take the building and I, reposition it. I take an office building and turn it into apartments. That's a different stage of development. And or taking a building, demoing it and putting something new. So all those different phases where you're adding value, that's development.
So with your program, how do you cover the different phases? And then to what extent are you holding hands with your students to identify opportunities when there's such a wide range of opportunities that could be out there? I mean, I think this is one of the things a lot of beginner investors struggle with, and myself included, where you and I are friends through GoBundance, which I've talked about on this podcast many times, but I know I've been in the room with people doing so many different things in so many different locations and so many different asset classes. And I remember someone saying, pick a location, pick an asset class, and let's start there. But when you've got a community of students that have a myriad of interests, live in different geographic regions all over the country, like what does the process look like to help you from your perspective of your role in helping them get from concept to outcome?
So in the academy itself, I always say we have content that they can go and they can watch videos. And I'm constantly putting new resources in there. And if anybody asks a detailed question, or I call them think out loud sessions, where they're like, Katie, here's an opportunity, think out loud for it. And I'll record it. I'll ask them first. I'll record it and I'll add it to the community. So I'm constantly adding that. But in addition, I didn't want to create something that's evergreen. And like you said, a lot of times you can like, I call it the buy the candle. You need to light the candle, right? Like a lot of times we buy a candle, we sit on a thing, we don't ever light it. So I call then we need to put context over that content. And so we have a weekly developers advantage call where it is in essence like a mastermind from what we do, like a golden the wisdom circle in GoBundance, where each person gets a certain amount of time. And sometimes they don't need it to talk about their project. Sometimes they'll be like, I just want to be in the room. Right. I just want to hear the conversations. And that's half the battle, right? Is being in the room and listening to these conversations. I was very blessed growing up with that. I didn't realize it growing up, but just being in the room and hearing those conversations and the dialogue and how things are positioned, that's part of the fun. But then we look at the process itself is very linear from a development standpoint. However, then like anything else, you can niche into those different lanes. You can niche into, and this is where we even start the academy with, is we go over the 7 phases of development, we go over product types, and then we really dig into your own personal time, talent, and treasure triangle, your risk tolerance, and your goals. And that really, if you're not focused on a phase and a product type and your strategy, that helps us define your roadmap strategy, which we do in the first session when you enter the academy. Because I got to know where you're headed. I got to know what your passion is. I got to know where your North Star is. So when you come to those developers advantage calls every week, now I know where you're going. I know where to push you. And there's been connections where it's like, hey, you're doing this. I heard this property. Here's an opportunity. And I know you do that like secondhand as well. But we're, 1 week we're talking through a residential subdivision where we're saving this developer $510,000 in 45 minutes by going through the things that the city was making her do and saying, no, you don't need to do that. Here are 3 options that I've done in the past. Here's what we can do. Here's how to take it on. And we kind of guide them through. So in essence, it's intensive coaching along the process. One of my students is doing an urban infill project, which is a special place in my heart for those because I love them. But they already bought the building before they came into the academy, where I would want to control it versus commit to it. Now we're working with that. Okay, how do we start to get you going quick so you're not burning money, right? That's, I think, sometimes when people step into development, they're always told, well, take your 20% and buy the land. Yeah, but like, have you controlled that opportunity? And a lot of times we'll shoot ourselves in the foot if we do. There's so many times people come to me and we're like, I bought the property, I can't rezone it for what I want to do. So now I own the property. I'm like, you should control it versus commit, right? And so that question of like, how do you do that? It's literally like everybody gets a certain time. We also do intensive strategy focus sessions in upfront. And then as part of the 6 month experience, they get a one-time deep deal dive with me where they can literally, it's us one-on-one and they put everything together. But also in the academy, we have the Level Up Lounge where they have their own project portal that they can post information, post questions, post site maps, pitch decks, everything, and anybody can look at it and review it. And they also can ask me questions. So it's really so much more than a coursework or academy. It's really that intensive coaching to hold them through that process.
And what's the biggest fear or reservation that you hear in people that have an itch they want to scratch, but they're sitting there on the sidelines and they bought the candle, but they haven't lit it? Like, talk to me about, because there, I'm sure there's still people listening. And they're like, oh yeah, this sounds cool, but whatever. Like, what's the biggest resistance or fear that you hear?
One of the biggest one is like, I don't know where to start. I don't know what I want to do. And I'm like, okay, that's great. You have motivation, right? And you don't know where you're going. So let's get you a roadmap, right? And it's going through that process of not like who do you want to be when you grow up, but like what do you want to create? What is your passion? Because as you know, you can probably do like tons of different professions, right? Like I could do that. I could do that, but do you want to? And so that's where we really hone in on that time, talent, and treasure triangle is like, how much time do you have to donate? Don't I say donate if it's a side gig, like dedicate to it, donate to it. How much talent do you have, right? Do you know how to do it, or do you have to bring somebody in? Then how much treasure, how much money can you put in it? And start to look at that. And then really the overarching conversation is what's your why, what's your passion? And really it's I really want to, reignite our downtown. I want that to be a place. Okay, let's look at that, right? And then how do we step into it with your time, talent, and treasure? Or I want to build homes for affordable living or substance abuse. I mean, so it usually starts with a passion. There's something that's fueling you. Okay, what is it? And then evaluate where you are in life, evaluate your risk tolerance, and then let's put goals and get that strategy and that map, that roadmap. And a lot of times, people, when they come to the academy, I had another strategic roadmap call the other day with a new student. She goes, I thought this was just going to be like, here's where you find this, here's where you find this. She's like, you're digging deep quick. I'm like, well, we're ready to go. Right. And that's the accountability I think we all crave, but it's a pain point to get into. And I know, like in your collective, you're holding some of those ladies and people accountable, right? And the first step is getting out of your head and committing to being in the room.
100%. I was on a podcast this morning, and I think they asked me a question around getting unstuck. And I was like, the first thing I do is get in the room with people that are ahead of me in the game or are on the same journey as me
Yeah,
and remind me of my future. And because that is the first step, is get in the room, because we're going to stay paralyzed by our own insecurity and fear indefinitely if we don't start hanging around people that are doing the things that we deep down inside wish we could be doing, right? And
yeah.
sometimes we're afraid to say those wishes out loud because we don't even want to give that wish a voice until we know how. And it's like,
Mm.
okay, well, hang around the people that have figured out the how and learn from their mistakes, and you might get to their chapter 10 by your chapter 4 or whatever. So I
Yeah.
love that.
When people start to spin, this is a question I go to is like, so I'll role play with you if we can do this, right? So Erin, did you learn how to ride your bike by yourself?
No,
Who taught you?
my parents.
Your parents. Okay. And then you graduated high school, right?
Yep.
Did you have any like teachers or did you like self-taught?
Yes, lots of good teachers.
Right? So all along your journey, you've had these milestones of people teaching you and coaching you to get you more skill set to level up. And then you graduate, and as a world, we just throw you out there. We stop realizing how we started to level up in life. We stop thinking like, oh, I need a coach to help me do this. I need guidance to help me do this. Yes, we kind of screw up our people by saying, okay, you've graduated, here you go, you have everything you need. No, you have everything you need for a job. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you gotta get a whole different school, right? You got to get those mentors and coaches. And so that's when people start to like get that analogy. They're like, why did I think I could do this by myself? Like, I don't know. I don't know. Stop thinking that. Like, get in the room. Get in the room.
Well, I have learned a lot today, and I'm sure the listeners have as well. Something I want to point out here for everybody listening, and something that came up on a recent episode with a different guest, is just this idea of, you know, even tuning into the podcast is like buying the candle, right? But if no action is taken, then you've never lit the candle. And you might be listening out there thinking, that's not my path. That's not my passion. No problem. But if you're a real estate agent or a mortgage lender or a real estate professional that's serving the needs of your clients in some capacity, as always, what I'm passionate about, what I preach is this is a conversation. This is a conversation starter. So some people, they learn to think, how am I going to get something out of this? Right? Like, how am I going to apply this and get something out of it? And someone might be listening and thinking, like, it's not on my vision board to go get into real estate development. It's like, that's okay. But what could happen is that now with future clients, you're having bigger picture conversations about where does real estate fit into their wealth building journey? And even that question alone sparks a conversation with a potential client, an existing client, a past client that gets people's wheels turning. And if you can be the reason, you can be the catalyst for getting somebody thinking outside the box or thinking differently or thinking bigger, they're going to be thinking of you differently and bigger. And you
Yeah.
now positioned yourself as a more high level advisor in the marketplace because you were willing to have a conversation that had nothing to do with the transaction at hand, nothing to do with you getting another lead, and nothing to do with your next paycheck. It's just a conversation that positions you as a thought leader. And that's one of the biggest things I've learned in my many years of investing in myself, to have coaches and be in communities and put myself in the room, is that these types of things, like, I'm learning about what you're doing, and then it has me excited to share what you're doing with my community because I think there's a way to get people's wheels turning. And if we can help people think bigger and think beyond the 9 to 5 that they have or where their next paycheck's coming from, it starts to create a ripple effect that expands out far beyond we could possibly imagine. I am kind of curious though, because as someone who was on the sales side in the mortgage space, and because this was pretty foreign to me because I hadn't dipped my toe into commercial, I was always just doing residential investing. Do you find there's real estate agents and mortgage lenders out there like me that don't necessarily understand this, but could be a great referral source for you? Like, if they have a client that says, hey, do you do commercial? And it's a residential realtor, maybe they don't do commercial, but maybe that would be a trigger of them saying, no, but I know this gal you should follow on YouTube. She's got all this amazing stuff around that arena. Like, I'm just kind of curious if you see a lot of referrals coming from realtors that want to have those conversations, but they don't necessarily have the breadth of wisdom and experience that you have. Can they drive them to you? Can they make connections for clients to have conversations with you to get their wheels turning so that they can support them at a higher level?
Yes, yes, and yes. So all of that. So and you know me, my heart is, and I just love people to learn the process. I love people to understand how to get in the game. And so when with the Kim Group as my real estate brokerage, I have a goal to double my residential referrals every year. And so far I've been hitting it, and I got to put a plan in place because we're a little behind in Q1. So, but what I love, like one of the projects we did, Cooperage 214, was a residential agent that she's like, Katie, these guys want to do a development deal in the warehouse district. I don't really know what's down there. I know this is your jam. Like, can you get on a call with them and we'll refer it out? And I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. So when we get on those calls, again, I'm an extension of her real estate team. And we've worked, I mean, she's probably my biggest referral giver too. Like, because she'll be like, hey, I have this investor, because we not only give referrals for the first opportunity, we give it for every time your client's a member of our deal structure. So we value those referrals. So whether you bring us in for a one-off consulting to say, hey, do you want to hire us as a developer for fee? Or hey, do you want to help us like co-agent this deal with you? Like that's something we also do because again, I want to teach agents how do you get in the game? Like you're seeing these opportunities and how do you help your client? Because for too long, like a lot of times when people think of financial advice, what do? You go ask your financial advisor, hey, do you know? Yeah, do you know? Well, they should also be doing that to the real estate agent. And the real estate agent should have that expertise of, oh, you need some tax structure, you need some tax strategy. Well, let's start to look at this or this or this, but you have to educate yourself to be able to talk to that, right? So like part of what we did with like the Trusters deal, we had investors come to us that say, Katie, I don't need to make more money. I want to make more money, but I need to like figure out how to keep more money. Like, how do I get like this tax structure? So we were like, well, we have this opportunity with this development coming in. Do you want to look at it? You know, but if you're again, if you don't educate and your network is your net worth. So for those residential agents, they can reach out to me and say, hey, Katie, we have this opportunity. I don't know what to do. Let's have an exploratory call. Let's see what we can do. From that call, I'll probably give you 3 to 5 ways we can work together. Or if you're rocking and rolling with it, I'll say, here's some advice. Go. Same thing. It's like that call to me is like, I want you to know I'm a resource for you. That's why we host that masterclass every single month, because there's been a couple people who have gone to every single one and they're still learning and they have different questions at the end. Well, again, they're just starting to digest all of what can happen. And sometimes when you have too many opportunities, you don't know which way to start. Those agents, like that was one. Another agent said, like, hey, I want to start doing fix and flips. And from a residential side, how do I start to set up my company to go forward? Again, it's great. Let's talk about that. It's a conversation.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned it earlier, your heart, and I obviously know you as a friend. And, for those listening that have been listening for a long time, I'm a huge fan of the Go Giver. And that is what Katie Kim embodies to her core. So I don't want anybody listening to be afraid to reach out to you, because yes, you created this community because so many people were reaching out and you were giving from your limitless heart to give and to share. And because you are so passionate about this, that there's nothing but authenticity that pours out of you and love. And
Yeah.
so, for everybody listening, I would encourage you to meet Katie at a minimum, because as always, we talk about what does it really mean to be a resource to our clients above and beyond what we get paid to do. It means having resources and tools in the tool belt. And Katie's just another one of those tools, like another person to say, hey, I know somebody that might be able to help you with this. And I've done that recently. I met a gal at a conference, and she made mention that she had just done her first flip and she was curious about invest in doing more development. And she's got this, great job in a W-2, but she really sees the light with the opportunity to build true wealth, which she may or may not be able to do through this W-2 path. And it was great for me as just literally, I had just met her and I said, grab me later because I have a ton of resources for you. And I just gave her a couple different suggestions and resources, and you were one of them, Katie. And it was like that to me made me feel more empowered as a person to have a tool in my tool belt that I could share with a brand new relationship that has since become a friend. And
Yeah.
that's why I always encourage people, think beyond the transaction, think beyond the paycheck, think beyond the just what's right in front of you, and think about what it means to really build out this network and have all these resources, so that when you're having conversations with your clients, they see you as this high level professional, as this resource, this authority, because at a minimum, you're like, I can point you in the right direction, right? And
Mhm.
that has more value than any of us can ever possibly imagine. We talk all the time about the ripple effect. You can never know how far your reach will go by just having an impact on one person's life today. So you've
Yeah.
had an impact on my life, Katie. I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here today. If the listeners want to follow you or find you, or get a hold of you, what are the ways they can do that?
Yeah, so you can find me online at katiekim.com or follow on social media at the Katie Kim. And we provide knowledge nuggets and money math to our YouTube channel. So I definitely would encourage you to subscribe there to learn some of the lingo and some of that math equations too. And what you said is to be that resource. A lot of times we want to look at step 10, but you can't figure out where 10 is. You got to start looking at what's one, two, three, and being that resource and that connector that you do so well is everything, right? Because we don't need to focus on 10. We need to focus on the next three steps, and then that'll bring more clarity as we go.
I love it. Well said. Well, thank you so much, Katie. I appreciate you.
Likewise, appreciate you back.
And to all my friends out there, as always, I love you. I appreciate you. If you enjoyed this interview or any of the interviews you've heard, please make sure to stop what you're doing and leave that 5-star review. It does help us continue to attract amazing guests like Katie and help this content get found so more people can build a life you don't need a vacation from. I love you. I appreciate you. I will see you next time.